Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, and be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for joining us here on the program with Dr. Emmet Miller, joining us again for another insightful program. And today, first, we'll let you know that Dr. Emmet Miller is going to share with us his insights, his perspective, his observation on listening to that still small voice. I make reference every program about going within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, because I personally believe that we get perfect vision, if you will, or insight, if you want to put it that way, from that still small voice, the divine, if you wish. I call it my friend. And Dr. Emmet Miller, I also call you my friend. Thank you for joining us again.
Hello, friend. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. It's great to see you again, too, and to share with our listeners the perspectives, your perspectives in that regard, considering the fact that you are someone who has been involved with mindfulness and meditation for, if I may say, decades.
Yeah, 5 of them.
Wow. 5 of them. Well, I've been around for 64 years, so if I've wasted 14 of those years, I guess. Hey, it's great to have you with us. Let's dive in. As I mentioned, I talk to folks all the time about following our intuition, if you want to call it that gut feeling, if you will. Sometimes when we walk into a room, we'll feel a certain energy, and we'll get this sense of, well, a party went on in here, or what happened here? It sounds like it feels like somebody died, or there was a fight, or those kinds of things. And it also triggers the more primitive aspects of us, the fight or flight mode, mm-hmm. And our intuition kind of guides us along those paths. And that's just some of the very cursory kinds of aspects of our intuition. Talk to us about your experiences, especially early on when you first became aware of your intuition, that internal guide.
Well, yeah, I don't know that I knew that it was an internal guide, but I can recall a very seminal event in my life, which was when I was in the 5th grade in the New York City schools. There in the inner city of New York, but just across the border was a pretty good grade school. And my teacher said, we're going to do book reports. Never done a book report before. And she had a big pile of books on a table in front of her desk, and we all came up and took a book. And I'm not sure how I picked up a book called Five Chimneys, which is the story of Auschwitz and Birkenau, the Nazi camps, by a woman who had lived through the camps for 2.5 years, who happened to be a doctor. And she was an inmate, of course. And at the end, she wrote this book in which she described what she saw from a doctor's point of view, just in terms of how people, really how people were tortured and the kinds of unthinkable things that went on. I think she had moved to, I think, 3 different camps. I think she was at Auschwitz and Treblinka and Bergen-Belsen. At any rate, I was stunned. I'd never heard of a Holocaust. I didn't know anything about this. And I mean, here I was 12 years old. How it taught me history, but nobody taught me about this. And this seemed to be really important. And so I went around and started talking to people about it. A lot of people didn't know. And those who had something to say said, it's okay, Hitler's dead. We don't have to worry about it anymore. And I could just tell by the way people were handling what I was saying that they didn't get it. And what they didn't get was something that had struck me as I was reading the book, is that human beings are capable of the most unbelievable cruelty, the lack of humanity. Before they, after they gassed people, they pulled out their gold teeth and melted it down into gold jewelry. If they had a nice tattoo on it, they cut the skin off and make a nice lampshade out of that. It's on and on. It's a good book. Olga Lengel wrote it, and it's a wake-up call that kind of thing can happen. And of course, people had done bad things before, but never at the industrial scale at which this was done, with the death camps and what looked like showers. And they said, okay, go on and get showered before you come into the camp. But they weren't showers. Gas came out of it and killed everybody in there. I mean, on and on. And already that was 15 years ago at the time I was reading about it. I said, if Hitler was able to do that at that time, what about with the weapons that we have here in 1955? Just think of how many people you could kill then and how rapidly.
Yeah.
Not to mention taking a look back where we are now in terms of the weapons that we have and the ways of killing people. And I immediately got this shock that because people weren't paying attention, it was bound to happen again, because this somehow was the nature of humanity or society, or what do I know? I'm in the 5th grade, but if somebody else doesn't do something about it, I'm putting on my list of things to do to figure this out and to make it so this can't happen again. And that guided me. And so I really had to learn about the world and about people. So I studied science, and I liked science because science is organized truth. And it's possible. It's like, this is true not because I said so, but because if you do this experiment, you'll find it's true. What I call bowling ball reality. Bowling ball reality, where you take a bowling ball and you hold it 4 feet above your naked foot, and then you philosophize as to what's going to happen when you let the ball go. Kind of reminds me of the recent election.
Yeah.
So, philosophize about what happens, but maybe there's a spirit that comes down and lifts the bowling ball and carries it away. Or that when you let it go, the bowling ball mysteriously stays fixed right there at that position. Or you can have all kinds of theories about it. all kinds of different realities. We say, well, that's my reality. Well, that's my reality. Well, bowling ball reality is what happens when you let the bowling ball actually go. And what happens, of course, is it crushes your foot, or
Right.
else you move your foot really rapidly. So that's what science tells us, what is really true. And then I really fell in love with biology, and embryology and evolution. And then I realized that I had to, and I also got very involved with mathematics, because mathematics teaches you the logic that's underneath the science. And then I decided I had to go to medical school because I had to learn everything there was about the human being if I was gonna do something that's gonna change the world in this way. And by the time I got finished medical school, I was ready for, my next flash of insight, because I noticed that people healed differently depending on how you treated them. It was lots of times more important than the medication you gave somebody was how you treated them as a human being.
Mm.
And if I saw a person and they had injured their knee, well, I could talk about how their knee was hurt and how it might get worse, and one day they wouldn't be able to walk, and maybe they'd have to have a new knee, that doctor kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Or I would place my hand gently and lovingly on their knee and say, your knee's basically a very good knee, and it's possible for this knee to heal. But in order to heal, it's going to need some support. Are you willing to give it some support and healing? Because it's designed to last a lifetime, and we can do that. Well, people would get better so much more quickly when I handled things like that. Many other stories that I saw in medical school, things that I read. And so I realized that it was getting into that part of the brain that could affect human beings at the physical level. And also in my studies in psychiatry, I found I had this wonderful ability to connect with people, even in the psychotic wards. Mm. And a person would come over to me and say, like, you're not Muhammad. I would say, you're absolutely correct. Let me shake your hand. What is your name? And pretty soon we'd be having a conversation, and I would kind of talk them into giving up their symptoms. I was free. I'm a medical student. I wasn't. So when I got out, so I realized then that, and I had also studied computer programming in 1962 before. I'm probably the first doctor to ever study computer programming. And I began to realize that what's going on in a person has to do with the subconscious mind, and that subconscious mind is reacting with stress. And the stress that it reacts with puts chemicals in the body, things like cortisol. And cortisol pumped into your body at times to fight or flight, but you've got a few seconds or you're dead because this lion's about to jump on you. Mm. What can you do about that? So what your body does is it pumps cortisol into your body, which basically starts dissolving the organs of your body to turn them into sugar, into glucose, so that you have the energy to fight off the lion, or better still, run away. And, in 20 seconds, you either chase the lion away, or you've run away, or you're dead. Now, and that's how it was. And so this stress reaction takes place, but it's over very quickly. And the first thing you do is when you realize you killed the lion, you go, woo! And you relax, because all the functions of the body, your heart, your breathing, the stress cycle, the daily cycle of waking and sleeping, there's action followed by relaxation. Your heart beats systole, and then it relaxes diastole. And that works fine. And so if you're going to cardiovert somebody, you have to give them a shock at the right time during that. If you give it the wrong time, you can send them into a fatal arrhythmia.
Yeah.
But you need that moment of relaxation in the heart because it refills with blood during the time it's relaxed. When you're asleep at night, your body heals itself and it stores the memories that you had from that day and works out some of the problems that your subconscious mind thinks you need working out. But the point is, how can one get inside there and change it so that people are not carrying stress with them all day long? It's because there's this annoyance and this annoyance and this annoyance, and they all keep the cortisol flowing, the adrenaline's flowing, and this is what's at the root of most of our illnesses, most of our emotional disturbances, at the root of most of our habit disorders that we have and our addictions. It's all because the tension in the body is created. Stress is not something that happens to us. Stress is something that we do with what happens to us. If somebody calls me a name, oh, you're no good. You're just a stupid wetback immigrant, illegal immigrant. Well, that may be true, but it's not useful for me to pump cortisol into my body unless I'm physically going to have a fight, but I'm not. And when I get a bill that looks too high, I'm not going to kill somebody because of that. I don't need those. But all day long, there's this drip, drip, drip of toxic chemicals into our bodies, which over time create all of our illnesses. Not all of them, but most of them. Oh, well, what about if you're in an automobile accident and you crush your arm? How does that have to do with stress? Well, you crushed your arm because you were hit by a drunken driver. That driver was drunk because he drank too much. Why did he drink too much? Because he feels really guilty about having cheated on his wife. And so he had a few extra drinks to relax, and then he drove home. Yeah. His emotions, his reaction to seeing his own behavior created stress, which then ended up breaking your arm, etc. But how do you get into this computer of a brain that's in there and reprogram it so that it allows you to relax instead of being in stress? Plus the fact, and this is so important, is that when you're in an emotional state, the very emotions, because you have to fight it, subconscious monkey mind thinks that you've got to fight a tiger like now, right? It doesn't want you thinking about it like, I wonder if this is the same tiger that was after me last week, or what if this tiger got through a hole in maybe I should build a bigger fence, or should we move? No time for strategizing. It's kill or be killed. It's fight or flight. It's life or death. Yeah. In other words, that when you're in an emotional state, when you're angry, when you're anxious, when you're afraid, when you're resentful, when you're jealous, on and on, all of those kinds of tense negative emotions are made for crisis situations. And what nature does then to shut off this higher level thinking, it shuts down your prefrontal cortex, which is the highest part of your brain. That's the executive level of your brain. That's the place that's not functioning well in people who have attention deficit disorder, for instance. They are supposed to be doing the homework, but they can't stop being distracted by the traffic going down the street, or something fell off the table, or a random thought comes along. They're not able to say, no, I'm doing my work, and they focus on it, and that's it. So this part of the brain is shut down by the subconscious mind, namely by the amygdala, this little almond-shaped thing that's in the brain that's causing all our problems. Well, I exaggerate, but we do that these days. Even the president does that. And But it's almost completely true. And it's certainly in the majority of cases, which is good enough. So that being in that tense state, you will not be able to make wise decisions. You will not be able to to set up positive strategies for the future and set yourself on track to the strategy and set up goals and then honor yourself as you reach each goal. This is the part of the brain that does that. When that's not there, it's you punch somebody in the nose, or you run away, or you get drunk, or you go have an affair, or you go gambling, or you have a migraine headache. All of those things are simply escapes from that terrible feeling. I don't, I just don't know who's going to win this football game, and I've got $50, to get away from that kind of, I'll have a drink.
Yeah.
And then we train ourselves. Well, at any rate, soon after I finished medical school and I went into the Army, and did not want to go in the Army, but I was there. And I managed to talk the Surgeon General's office into letting me do some experiments where I divided the trainees into two groups. One group got treated at sick call by doctors, and the other got treated at sick call by medics that I had trained for a couple of days. And those that the medics were treating got better much more rapidly than those being treated by the doctors. And they felt happier with the medical care that they got, because the doctors were very technical, and they were ophthalmologists and orthopedists and various other immunologists and so forth, who were being forced to come to sick call in the morning. So they weren't interested, and you could just see what happens, how much better people get for ordinary, colds and sore holes and, the usual kind of thing that you see at sick call.
Yeah.
But how do you get into that place? Soon after I finished my work in the Army, I think it may have been maybe during my last few months in the Army, I discovered a doctor who was practicing medical hypnotherapy, which I never even heard of. I'd been to one of the most prestigious medical schools in the country, Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Nobody told me about that. And so what I saw is that people would come in the emergency room bleeding, and he would induce hypnosis, and he could slow down the breathing. I met a dentist who would do that when he was operating on a tooth, doing a root canal or some of the other doing an extraction. And he would put the person into a hypnotic state and tell them to turn off the bleeding, and then they would turn off the bleeding. And then, after he had finished, and now he needed the bleeding to start again, he would say, you could begin to let the blood flow again, and you could just kind of see it fill in. People with headaches, in a short period of time, and people going through delivering babies, feeling completely comfortable. And it's like, I was amazed. So I asked him, I says, show me how to do that. Show me what you do. And he says, in his home, he says, lie down on the sofa and I'll show you. And he says, okay, first of all, take a deep breath and let it out. As you let it out, let your eyelids close and just focus on the sound of my voice. Nothing else is important right now. Just you're resting comfortably and hearing the sound of my voice. And as you listen to the sound of my voice, allow yourself to begin to relax. So I'm following along with this. And about 2 or 3 minutes later, I shifted into this altered state of consciousness. And wow, I got it. This is what I've been looking for. This was the programming state for the human mind. And if a person goes into a programming state, and then you give them a piece of information, the mind will accept that piece of information as if it's true. In one study, and it doesn't have to be hypnosis, is what I found soon. There's lots of ways of getting into that state. Deep prayer can put you there. Meditation can put you there. guided imagery. I just read about a study where they were working with volleyball players, and they had the players for a while take 2 or 3 minutes and visualize themselves flying over the hills, over the oceans, and they put them back in, and they jumped much higher in this half of the game because they had envisioned themselves flying. And so you think of yourself as light, and now you jump, and it feels like your body's much lighter. Later on, I had the good fortune to be living in California near the world champion San Francisco 49ers, and I worked with a number of guys there. And with one of them in particular was Roger Craig, and he loved it. He learned how to use the imagery in his mind to make himself run faster, be stronger, and that sort of thing. I told a little story in his learning. I was teaching him about the Zen archer. When most people go out they take out a quiver full of arrows and a bow, and they spend all day shooting arrows at different things. Now, the Zen archer goes out with his bow and one arrow, and he spends the day deciding upon the right target, and then extremely carefully, in perfect balance. And then at a certain moment, he says, the archer and the arrow and the target become one. And the arrow is released at that moment. And of course, it sails right through the middle. And I have to say, you want to be that clear about your intentions. You want to be that focused. So he described this championship, I think it was against Los Angeles, and he described it to me later. He said you could see it in the playback as, he broke through the line, and he's, in the backfield now, and he's running. And I think we're like, just, this in the last minutes, and we're a couple of points behind. And he sees, and there's two safeties, and they're coming in, they're converging as he's going forward. And you can see they had the line on him. They were going to get there before he did. And then suddenly in his mind, he says, I can be like the Zen archer. And then he thought to himself, the football and I and the goal line are one. And he said, you could see it as like someone lit a turbo, and he goes, these two guys crash into each other, and he goes across the line. So it's this kind of thing is possible. Okay. And so we know that hypnosis, so I'm on the couch as he's showing that to me, and I have this realization that this is what I've been looking for, how to hack the human mind, we would call it now. And I started laughing in joy. It's like I discovered the new world. And I think I must have laughed for about 2 minutes. Those kind of laughs where you can't stop laughing. It's like, you have someone who's telling you this kind of jokes are going, stop, wait, don't tell me anymore. You can't. I felt that way. And I knew. And that was that still small voice, and said, yeah, this is what you've been looking for the last 22 years. And from that, I was able to really start a new form of medicine, the medicine of mind, body, emotion, and spirit, really. Now they call it mind, body medicine. And most people know that in hypnosis, you can get people to get better from many different symptoms. But a week later, or a few days later, or a month later, they're back doing the same thing they were before, because they didn't really, it was just temporary. And I realized it was temporary because you can't change the mind like that positively. To reprogram the mind, you've got to practice if you will learn how to speak Japanese, okay, I can teach you, Ohayou gozaimasu, you're not going to remember that. But if you sit and every day you practice it, pretty soon you can do it. Now, if this is something you want to do, you will do that. So my specialty was then in mind body medicine was teaching, working with people to find out the trauma that has happened within them that gave rise to the unconscious mind learning poor habits. In other words, let's say that you were physically abused a lot as a child. Well, your mind couldn't handle the confrontation. Here's a person who loves me and they're beating me. And so instead, I hate that person. I don't love that person. And I don't love that man that's abusing me. I don't love that man. And so the unconscious mind learns to not love men, to be afraid of men. That person spends their whole life being afraid of men. Or maybe they go to school one day and they've got the mismatched socks on, and the class laughs uproariously. You got a mismatched. I got so embarrassed. And so the unconscious mind learns that people are going to look at you and they're going to find things to laugh at. And it's like, it's not that you're laughing at my socks, you're laughing at me. So I'm the object of ridicule. And so anytime anybody looks cross-eyed at me, it's like, I think they're judging me. I am incapable of speaking in front of a group of people. Now, spiders scare people, but worse than that, the most frightening thing in our country is for people to stand up in front of a small group and just give a little public speech. That's the scariest thing of all. Why? These people are here to see you. They love you. They're fascinated to hear what you have to say. Why are you afraid? Well, you're afraid because of something that programmed you in the past. Now, we can go inside. One of the ways we can do is to go back, relive that original traumatic incident, but relive it without any tension, without any fear, without any. These are children. It looks funny to them, and they're uncomfortable, and they're laughing because it makes them feel a little bit better. Nothing to do with you. And then you kind of go through your life and see and imagine yourself and experience yourself reliving these experiences with a different perspective and from a place of relaxation, comfort, confidence, or whatever other feelings you want, because all of our feelings are there within us. I'll often take a person back to an experience of joy or a religious experience or feeling in love because it's worthwhile, because they want to feel that at this moment in time. So you access that feeling intentionally. So you quiet negative feelings and you can go back and grab whatever feeling you want. I had an experience when my child was being born, and we wanted to, of course, I was smart enough to know child should go to the breast immediately because it's been happening for the last 2 million years. It should continue. The baby's born. We're in Stanford Hospital, and 2 pediatricians come in. They do the little check to make sure the APGAR is a good number and everything. Okay, child looks good. We're going to take the child to the newborn nursery for the first 2 hours. I said, why? That's our policy here. I said, no, well, the mother and I really want the baby to stay here with her and to go to the breast right away. I'm sorry, I can't let you do that. You can't let me do that. Wow. So I stepped in the door where they were about to go through the door. I said, no, you're not taking the baby anyway. You're going to give me the baby. They says, you have to sign papers that it's against medical advice. I said, and you're going to go and get those papers. Now give me the child. Give me the child. Huh? And so if I need to feel strong, if I need to feel resistant, if I decide I'm not going to let some MF get away with that, I remember that. And, I tell a story, my body, well, okay,
Yeah.
I can let it go now. So
Yeah.
all of these things are present within us. And then the next bit of insight is when I saw audio cassettes.
Ah, yes.
I can give the person the reprogramming that's necessary, which is a very pleasant guided imagery experience. And they go home and they practice that 2, 3 times a day. And, the numbers of people who were able to get well was just astounding. People who were going into surgery, I would have them practice healing before they go into surgery and practice going through surgery totally relaxed. And they do, and they usually use less anesthetic, and they lose less blood in the process. Fascinating what we found that we could do in the body. And it was that insight, and of course, just as you can work on the physical body and you can work on people's emotions, their feelings, and so forth, particularly the feelings of anger and fear and anxiety, which not only make us physically sick, but they make us incapable of having positive, loving relationships with other human beings. And finally, a real still small voice. The child floats for 9 months in this body temperature perfect fluid. And they're breathing the fluid, and that's just fine for those 9 months. And they're protected. Everything's done for them. And then that child is born. And when that child is born, that human spirit expects love to be there because it's been there since the beginning of time. Every mother loves the child automatically, just as animals, their form of love, they're there for that baby, and they're okay. Go ahead. I won't do anything else. You can nurse. A mother puts the baby. She feels the mother's breathing just as she knew it for so many months. When the mother speaks, they've proven that a child recognizes not only the mother's voice, but recognizes the language that was being spoken while they were in the womb, and other things.
Yeah.
So this child now should be protected. They do in Bali. The Balinese baby is not allowed to touch the ground for the first year of its life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's a big ceremony when that happens. There is always loved in that way. And the Balinese people I haven't been there since the 80s when I spent a lot of time there. Soft, lovable people. The men, as I describe it, were ready to laugh at the drop of a hat. I mean, they're just good humor, and this has something to do with that. So if we're surrounded by love, then we begin to get a notion of the truth of who we really are.
Yeah.
As we're able to grow. And if I want to play with that, if it's not dangerous, then mother gives it to me. I'm enabled to go out and do what I want to do and explore the things that I want to explore, and I'm protected and I'm not abused.
Mm-hmm.
But if something comes along at that point and I get abused intentionally or unintentionally, that can carry on for the rest of my life. That becomes a sensitizing event. And we basically have post-traumatic stress disorder. One example is a child, is a little toddler that's with his kid, and they're going through the grocery store, and the mother sees somebody and is chatting with somebody in the next aisle, and where's the kid? Well, kid's way on the other side of the store, scared shitless, screaming and yelling, and all of a sudden strange unknown people come, and they pick the child up, and everything's moving like that. Everything's crazy. Finally, there's the mother, gives it to the mother. And pat the child. And I mean, the crying stops in 2 or 3 minutes and it looks okay. But those 2 minutes that child was there could be a very profound trauma. And so that child is not capable of moving far away from mother, or later not move away from home, or to be separate. It has a built-in separation anxiety. Nobody knew that trauma took place. Sometimes a fall out of the crib and it happens. I had a woman who came to me because she had been working with my tapes. The tapes were the audio cassette tapes, which I put on the market back, I think, in 72 or 73, the first time anyone had done that, because as part of my plan for saving the world, I wanted to get this information out as far as possible. So they were available all over. And this woman came to me. She had been listening to my tape for about 20 years, and it was very relaxing for her, except that when she got to the deepest levels of relaxation, suddenly she would wake up with a shock. And she wanted to get more relaxed. I said, okay. So I started working with her, and I used age regression analysis. And she went back to her experience of being probably about 6 months old, lying in a bassinet late in the day. The setting sun was casting shadows of the lace curtain on the wall, and she was watching and just in a blissful state of complete surrender and relaxation. And meanwhile, her jealous 6-year-old brother sneaks into the room and pushes over the bassinet. So whenever in life she gets close to that level of relaxation, she gets shocked out of it. So the secret is, if we can raise our children and protect them as much as possible from shocking situations until they're old enough to be able to understand how to deal with that. You know, if you've learned how to swim, you can dog paddle, you know how to backstroke, you know how to do a primitive breaststroke. Someone throws you in the water, no problem. You take someone who's never been in the water, say, well, sink or swim, and throw that person in the water. You know, that's a terrible experience. They don't ever want to go near the water again. Yeah. So that's what we want to be able to do, and that's what we should be able to do. And then we grow up and we are human beings who are as capable of love as those people who surrounded us when we were infants. We have compassion. We have empathy for other people, which means we can feel what they feel. And we have compassion, which means that we want to do whatever we can to ease that person's pain and that person's suffering. Therefore, when we have a disagreement with someone, it's not like, okay, the idea is to debate them and to see who can win. And you win in any way that you can, even if you need to lie, even if you need to threaten the other person, yell at them so they'll kind of back down a little bit, that we do in our arguments.
Yeah.
Then you're not feeling that person's feelings. But if you go into it and someone says, I disagree with you, oh, fine, great. Let me know how you disagree with me. Share with me what you see and how you reason it. I'm really interested in knowing that.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see where you're coming from. Well, interesting. Let me tell you how I tend to see the same thing. I'm not telling you you're wrong.
Just
We
telling you my perspective.
Right. And we share and we come out with a more three-dimensional view instead of the two-dimensional view.
Yeah.
And so here we are. And so back to my original, very original flash of inspiration is what's going on is people don't know how to talk with each other. I think the conversations around during the campaigns of those who are running for office, You look at the ads that people put out, look at the names they called each other. No, notice the accusations. He's a rapist, or she's just a whore who slept her way to the top, and so forth. Complete lack of humanity, of caring, of compassion. Here in the United States of America, which kind of invented there being a country where for the first time, each person you felt was endowed with the right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And we care about people. And how do we do it? E pluribus unum. Out of many, one. We come together and we understand things. And used to be even the Congress, the Republicans and the Democrats, they would discuss and even argue about things. And it was time for lunch. They'd get together, and you were as likely to go out with someone from the other party as from your own party. Now they won't even sit on the same side of the room. And you never get caught going to lunch with somebody from the other side. So we live in a world, and when you look at advertisements, when people discovered when Edward Bernays, look him up, Bernays. Do you know Edward Bernays?
I haven't heard of him.
The Century of the Self is the movie about him. He's the guy who invented propaganda.
Oh, well, I'm gonna do you one better on the propaganda part.
Yeah.
Back in the early days, and we're talking 300 or 400 AD, the church began a propaganda campaign because there was a group of people, fairly large group, but a group of people who wanted to disseminate the information to the general public. And you already know who won that propaganda war.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll do you about 1,500 years ago.
Yeah, that's true. And people, it was, and in those days, all other countries in the world, they were formed because there was a strong leader who imprisoned or shot the people who didn't agree with him. It's just like, where the Soviet Union came from. We'll kill Trotsky and and so forth. And, suddenly we had this country here where it wasn't might makes right.
No.
It was our ability to get together and to communicate with each other and to see the oneness in us.
Yeah.
And that's a still small voice that can come up within a person when they become calm enough.
Yeah.
Not running from anything. And they go, prayer is one of the most common places that people will find it. Yet still, and suddenly you begin to see beyond all of the phony things that stand between us and say, we don't need to let those things. Okay, so your skin's a different color from mine. That doesn't mean anything about who you are.
Right.
You just have other experiences. And yet, let's look at what's happening. Look at the protestations, they're calling them now. Look at those people bashing and screaming and bullhorns at each other. It's insanity out there in the world. Or, you want to have some fun, get a job working for one of the polling stations or something, and then the death threat starts coming in.
Oh,
imagine that. Oh, we're going to kill your daughter, and we're going to do this to your wife, and so forth. That's just how it goes. And so if you want to be in government, you've got to have 3 or 4 bodyguards walking around you. That's what we've disintegrated into. So it's like countries used to be, where it's about power and someone just, forcing other people to be loyal to the leader instead of how can we get together and govern ourselves.
How can we move forward as a society, as a community, even as a family for that matter? Families have been splintered over the last 9, 10, maybe more than that years. And over not just politics, sometimes over religion, sometimes over economics, and whatever category you want to put out there, that's the dividing factor. And I myself, in my family, Myself and my brother had a very interesting conversation a couple 3 years ago, following my sister's memorial, and I knew where this conversation was sort of headed. So internally, I said to myself, "Self, it doesn't matter how this conversation ends. He will still be your brother,
Mm-hmm.
and you will love him just as you do right now." And I do. I'm proud of him for what he's accomplished. The man he's younger than me, and he's retired. Okay. But but my non-retirement is my choice, just as his retirement is. He lives half the year in Vietnam and the other half in the States. He's obviously enjoying his life, and I applaud him for that's the whole point of this program, is to get people into a state, not a state of the union, but a state of happiness, of peace and joy and contentment. Now, that's not to say we won't have challenges along the way, as I like to put them. We will. That's just part of the human experience and part of this world and this life that we live.
Mm-hmm.
But it is those events that draw out in us that adaptability. Something you said earlier, and by the way, folks, we're talking with Dr. Emmet Miller, and we're talking about the still small voice and listening therein. Two things. One, you talked about the chemicals that we manufacture in what I consider to be the greatest pharmaceutical company in the universe. However, if we don't put in the right things to help to create those chemicals, then we're not going to function optimally. And in addition to what you also said about stress, okay, if we keep taking in through the other senses those aspects that generate not just the stress, but other things as well, then we are going to end up depleting that supply. And to that end, Doc, and I'd love for you, because you did touch upon this ever so briefly in terms of, the drinking and the gambling and so forth, that in many instances, the chemicals we're generating in our bodies can become addictive, not just creating addictive behaviors, but people will have, I think that's what some folks are labeled as ADHD or, compulsive, that kind of thing. And they get a great feeling out of the challenges. You see people jumping off of bridges with bungees and those kinds of things, or parasailing off of Everest, or, those kinds of things, because it gives them that adrenaline rush. And so they're sort of addicted to adrenaline.
That's right.
So those are the kinds of things that happen. But I wanted to ask you about the still small voice. And again, obviously from your perspective, what is it and where does it come from? I know that's deep, but
so it certainly comes from a level of intelligence that's beyond our own. It comes from a different level. And often people think of that as, the Great Spirit, or it's God, or it's Jesus, or it's my grandmother who died 60 years ago. Still, it takes different forms in different people. And the forms that it takes, for instance, if you talk to people in a Catholic country who make contact with that still small voice, they will usually associate it with a Catholic priest. If you talk to a Native American about that still small voice, they will relate it to Wakantanka, or that sacred mountain over there. And this story was about two twins who lived on a desert island, very primitive culture. The people who lived in their little town believed that the banyan tree growing in the middle of town was the sacred banyan tree. And every morning, everybody went and they prayed and gave their offerings to the great banyan tree. And so did one of the twins. He was a real believer, but the other twin says, "It's a banyan tree, man. Look, this is not God. You waste your time every morning." One day, as it happens, the twins were out walking in two different paths through the jungle. And wouldn't you know it, that a leopard comes out of the jungle, two leopards. One attacks one brother and the other attacks the other brother. Now, the other brother, who prays to the banyan tree, sees the leopard coming toward him and says, "Oh, good banyan tree, give me the strength." And he grabs the leopard by the neck and flips him over, and the leopard goes, "Whoa, I'm out of here." And the other twin sees the leopard coming toward him and goes, "Yeah, leopard." And was that banyan tree responsible? His belief is what worked. And to believe, whenever you come from a certain culture and you want to talk about a something that you believe in, if you say there's a potato that speaks to me, well, it could be. I mean, the Native Americans felt that corn was sacred. They prayed to corn. But if you say, "Oh yes, there's a corn cob that speaks to me," people think you're crazy. But if you say, "No, I see Saint Michael,"
Mm-hmm.
Saint Michael comes to me, or the Virgin Mary comes to me, "Oh, that's very nice." Yeah, so you usually accept images and concepts in your experience and in your mind, and the images that you have in your mind, and they get put together to represent what is not representable. I mean, here we are with all the things that we can do. We still don't understand the atom. We don't really understand the atom. We give names to things, but it gets baffling as you get down there.
Mm-hmm.
And yet everything is made of atoms. So whoever made all of this not only knows what an atom is, but knows how to join it together in so many ways we can't even begin to think of it. So we want to begin to define God or define that sacred thing. Okay, but what you're going to end up doing is painting it with the colors that are in your paint kit, and that's okay. The important thing is that you can hear it,
Mm-hmm.
and that you can listen, and that it gives you consistently the right kinds of teachings. And those kinds of teachings that you get from it lead you to live your life in a way that is holy. In a sense, holy, W-H-O-L-E, whole. It's whole. So
Mm-hmm.
you're not a separate piece, but you're connected with each person you see. You greet people, and you honor people, and you respect people, just like our candidates for office respect each. I'm kidding. Good.
Thank you for that.
Good. Why not respect each other?
Yeah.
And again, it's back to the propaganda and back to the fact that the country is, our world is built on creating belief in people's minds that they need something. The Lucky Strike Tobacco Company came to Edward Bernays, Bernays, the Century of the Self. Fantastic. One of the stories in there, so Lucky Strike came to him and said, "We have all these men who are smoking, but women don't smoke." It was shameful for a woman to smoke. For a
Mm-hmm.
woman, she had to go and hide. You never saw a woman with a cigarette. So Bernays says, okay, I'll fix that. So he goes out, hires a bunch of young debutantes. He gets them all dressed up in finery. He sets it up with the Easter parade. That as the Easter parade comes down Fifth Avenue, they're going to be led by these well-dressed, wealthy debutantes, with their fancy poodles and Afghan dogs, and with men in their fancy little hats and at a certainly sends out a message to all the newspapers: send your photographers, because an event of great significance is going to happen at 10 o'clock on the corner of Fifth Street in Lenox, or whatever it was. So for all of reporters are there, and at a certain signal, all of the young, beautiful women opened their lucky strikes and puffed away.
Mm.
Click, 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 click. It goes to newspapers all over. And from that point on, it was very chic for a woman to smoke cigarettes. And then, and I remember there were commercial ads you'd see in the magazines. I've learned to inhale. I don't just pose, I actually inhale. Oh, you inhale? Oh, Mabel, teach me. And so we've created 4 or 5 million cases of lung cancer.
Yeah.
But we sold a lot of cigarettes along the way. And so his story is amazing. He actually worked with 5 different American presidents. Wilson, of course, was very much against war. But our one of the rich men rich Americans had been financing both England and France to fight the war, and J.P. Morgan, but they were beginning to lose the war. And so he goes to Wilson, who was his buddy, and says, I'm going to lose my vast fortune if these guys lose the war. You got to help me out. Wilson says, but I've been against the war. I can't do that. I'm going to do it. So they call on Bernays, and Bernays says, no, we're not fighting the war to help the kings and queens of Europe decide who gets the most land. We are fighting to make the world safe for democracy. And so we march off to war. That's how we got to go to war.
Yeah.
This is the manipulation where you create a believable story and then you feed it to someone. But before you feed it to them, you want to do something to get the mind to open. And you can open people's minds by scaring them.
Yeah.
By making them feel helpless, by making them think that they're going to get more boys or more girls, or by feeding something like that. But primarily by frightening them. Now, do you have dandruff? You may not notice that you have dandruff, but she does. Better buy the new.
A new shampoo.
Yeah, right. So
either that, there's another option. Shave your head.
Yeah, nobody would be crazy enough to do that.
No, nobody would ever do that.
So now we have millions of attention engineers whose whole goal is to attract your attention on television and radio, in print and in social media.
Yeah.
To attract that 5 seconds, you've got to not just get their attention, but make them say, I better look at this.
Yeah.
So if a starving baby will get it, or if you see somebody coming at someone with a knife and then it cuts off, you want to see what happens. Or there's something that, scary. You've got to do this, or this is going to happen, or the stock market's going to blow up. Read what so-and-so has it. And so this is what's coming at us all day long, because it convinces, or let's see what kind of underarm deodorants Steph Curry uses. I get that because being a star basketball player, he smells sweet. And
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, so that's it. So all day long we're being manipulated. And the same thing by you look at the the Washington Post, and you look at Fox News and look at what's supposed to be the news. You get two completely different stories, but the stories invariably are to convince you that those guys are wrong and that we're right. And so we're constantly being manipulated because we're constantly by our culture being pushed into feeling uncomfortable, frightened, lonely, angry, resentful. And again, looking back at the recent election, that's what was going on there. And so it's gotten that far now that the leaders of our country are, I mean, I wouldn't want my kids to behave the way some of these people are behaving. So what, this is going to be the model. And whoever the head of a company, that person's habits filter down through that whole company within a couple of years. It's amazing. People who you call on the phone and they treat you like crap. You go in there and find the CEOs and they have the same attitude. You go to a place where you've got a loving person at the top and who's respectful. It filters down. People learn it and they do it. And who can't learn it, they leave. Yeah. So this is what our opportunity is now, is to really recognize that we are being held in a constant state of tension, anxiety, and stress.
Well, there were two, I thought, opportunities in the last 8 years that I thought we could exhale, that the tension would be relieved. And that was in 2020. And I was hoping in 2024. And neither instance happened. But I found a way, my friend. I found a way to no longer be manipulated by those messages. The only time that I've heard the president-elect's voice has been on these short little newscasts. If the soundbite is used, I will hear it here on this radio station. We're talking about 5 to 10 seconds. Yeah. Otherwise, I have not heard, and I do my best not to see his image on any of the social media locations that I go to. I'm exhausted. I am burnt out of the whole thing. I did my part on election day. All right. And now I'm done for the foreseeable future until the next election, of course, but I'm done. I'm not going to allow myself to be, as I put this back in 2016, I was drawn into what I referred to as the quagmire, and it took me 6 months to get unsucked, as I put it. I got sucked in. It took me 6 months to get unsucked. And this is the thing that I don't understand about people who get bullied online. Why do you keep that account? Close it, delete it, shut it down, turn off your phone. And then guess what? You won't be bullied anymore by social media. And I just find this appalling that people think that they have to keep their social media accounts kind of like they have to keep breathing. You don't. You don't. I have shut down 2 Facebook accounts over the last 15 years. And one of them, the first time I did it was because I got some news that I didn't care for, because it was sad news. And I wasn't blaming Facebook. Don't get me wrong. But I thought, I don't want to get news that way. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Hang on one. Yeah. I don't want to get news that way. And it was unfortunate. It was an unfortunate situation where it was a suicide pact that this couple made. Well, the couple was made up of one of I consider him my mentor back in Phoenix when I was growing up as a little kid listening to radio. His was the voice I heard on one of the local stations. And I thought, oh, I don't want to get news like this again. I mean, if somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, did you hear so and so passed away?" I said, "No, I didn't. What happened?" I'd rather get it that way, face to face, person to person, than and so forth. We're talking with Dr. Emmett Miller. We're talking about that still small voice, and we really need to spend some time listening. One of the things that I thought of, Doc, and we'll wrap this up here. One of the things that I thought of in regards to listening to the still small voice is the concept of telepathy. The still small voice you might hear an audible voice, an internal audible voice.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, I heard my sister's voice almost a few moments after her passing, just reassuring me, "Hey, everything's okay. Everything's okay." I never heard that from my father on his passing, but I get impressions.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes images, and just sometimes non-verbal, non-audible impressions of maybe encouragement. Hey, you're doing fine, keep going. And sometimes I will do a self-pep talk out loud to myself in the car, walking, what have you. "Hey, it's okay, everything's good, and I'm going, where the heck did that come from? Then it's my dad. I associate it with my dad.
Uh-huh.
So we can hear from that ear of corn and tell others it's Saint Michael. That's fine. But that was one of the things that my father was quite private about, was his spiritual life and experiences. Now, he did share in an interview that I did with my mother and he in 2015 that neither my parents care anymore, and haven't for many years, with organized religion. And my mother was born and raised Catholic. My father converted when they married and raised us as Catholics, but never did anything when they became disillusioned, never pushed us to push away. They always let us make that decision. But he kept his inner life personal. And you know what? I don't really have a desire to go to my mother and say, "So what did he think? And what did he believe? And how did he pray?" And da da da. That's his business. Just like it's your business, Dr. Emmett Miller, and mine, as to how we pray and who we pray to and what we pray, and all of those different things. And that's what always perplexed me about Christian radio that I worked for 15 years. They always talked about this personal relationship. And then they wanted to stick their nose into my personal relationship, telling me I was or wasn't saved. And that's why the still small voice is so important, as you have talked to us here on this program about. And I thank you so much for coming back a third time to talk more about the work that you do, greater insight into the work that you do. And people can go to what website, Doc, so that they can get more information, as well as I believe you've got some special gift that they can get by going to a particular part of your website. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that was the gift. Yes, that's still available. And it's at my main website, which is drmiller.com, drmiller.com. And then we put a slash in there. And after the slash, we put your word in.
Choices. Yeah.
So
and what will they get when they go to drmiller.com/choices?
Well, they will get a copy of this guided imagery, where you can begin to learn about how to open yourself to your higher mind, to higher knowledge, into more joy, happiness, freedom, and health. And you'll also be able to gain access to my website, which is drmiller.com, and see I've got dozens and dozens of different guided imagery meditations for dealing with all kinds of illnesses. And it's not to replace medicine, but medicine generally is just treating the symptoms of disease. What we're looking at is going to the source, and not treating the disease, but treating the part of you that lets the disease stay there, or that is producing the disease or the illness or the upset. And there are many other things there. Pretty much the complete story of how the mind works and how it works in guided imagery and that. So it's my life's work. I'm an old guy now, but the website will still be there. I don't know that this special offer will be there forever, but
Right.
the website will be there.
Right.
Um,
Similar to the interviews that I have done over the years, and the conversations that I have conducted with yours truly, you as well as many others. And I just encourage people to go to your website as well. And of course, we will be linked to that link, drmiller.com/choices. We encourage people to go there and find out more as well. Before we wrap up, Doc, and I don't do this every single time, especially when we have returning guests on a regular basis, which I really do appreciate. But I'm going to ask you those three questions that I ask of my guests before we wrap things up here. And the first of those is, and in this particular instance, the answers could be the same, the answers could be different, but it doesn't matter. We're always curious as to who is Emmett Miller.
He is a being who has the form of a human male, who was gifted with an extremely intelligent brain, and who has endeavored to put this brain and everything that he's learned out in the world to produce what he feels so enamored of, which is love, and which is positive relationship between people, peace and healing and wholeness.
What gets you up in the morning?
Different things at different times. In the best of times, it is really looking forward to the excitement of the next day, and the joy that, like waking up on Christmas morning, every morning is Christmas. Yeah, at times when when I have a huge amount of work to do, what gets me up is an awareness that if I'm going to finish this project that I really care about, I'm going to have to get up and get to work so that I can finish the piece that I need to finish this day.
And finally, what was your best day?
Mm-hmm. Mm. There's so many best days, but what comes to me now is lying on the beach in Bali after having one of the scrambled eggs in the little shop down the way, scrambled eggs, which what turns out to be psilocybin mushrooms whipped up into them. And I'm lying there on the beach, and I have 3 Balinese women massaging my body in the warmth of the sun, the sound of the surf.
Mm. That sounds really nice. And maybe one day I might make it to Bali to have that kind of an experience. It sounds not only beautiful, but very relaxing as well. We thank you so much for sharing your insights on this program today. And we look forward to having you back again to continue this conversation about our lives, both as mortal humans, but also our lives as spiritual beings who are immortal. So thank you so much.
Well, let me say, I didn't say it, but for anyone who wants to personally consult with me,
yes,
you go to drmiller.com. And I'm a physician, and also I'm a life coach. So I'm a physician, which means that I can treat people in the state of California if they need treatment, but I can do life coaching with people throughout the country and throughout the world. So drmiller.com/coach, or if you just go to drmiller.com, you can see it in the menu. It'll say coaching, and here's where you can buy guided imagery and so forth. So
Fantastic. Well, I encourage people to take advantage of that. I think that,
and we do it by Zoom like
yeah,
this.
you
So you
don't
no longer have to drive to my office.
that's right. Probably would be a nice drive, but
Yeah.
you don't have to drive there. But again, I thank you so much, and I thank
Okay.
you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, video cast, love to love. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.